through the OLED. But then the really incredible ultra-thin applications of the organic compounds, the red, green, and blue organic materials which produce the light. These are in the order of 10 to 100 nanometers thick, so incredible precision. If we were to scale up a 100 by 100 millimeter OLED panel, the equivalent thickness would be painting a 1 millimeter layer of paint on an area a kilometer by a kilometer. Absolutely astonishing engineering which goes into creating an OLED. And actually, this is really the downfall of the technology. It was so advanced and so high tech that it increased the cost and made it incredibly difficult to manufacture. So I'm going to take you in a different direction now, into a parallel universe of smartphone displays technology. And so after leaving Philips Lighting, I moved to Japan and I was working for Apple on the iPhone 6s displays. And it was here that I found this really interesting kind of parallel between the lighting industry, where the smartphone displays industry were also looking at LED technology and OLED technology and seeing how these two fit together. So there was a lot of crossover, which I hadn't realized before I moved into that. One of the other things that I found fascinating from the smartphone sector in general was the incredible accelerated rate of development. To have moved from a Nokia feature phone to the advanced computers that we all have in our pockets these days in just 15 years is astonishing. And one of the things that I kind of noticed about that is, in addition to the huge consumer demand and the vast amounts of money in the smartphone industries, one of the things that they did really well was cross-pollinating between different industries, seeing what technologies they could bring in from other sectors to create a really advanced all-round product. And that's something that I think we need to bring into the way we all work and develop products and services. Giving a bit more of an in-depth overview of what I was working on. So I was working on LCD displays, liquid crystal displays, which use LED as the light source. And the way this works is having essentially a surface of light, and then this goes through a pixel color filter. And the liquid crystals essentially filter how much light comes through, and so they dim up and down to let different amounts of light through the subpixels to give the overall image. On the other hand, we have OLED displays, and instead of a liquid crystal kind of dimming down and reducing the light output, the individual OLED pixels would create the light. And so OLED displays are in fact much more efficient and really fantastically suited to a displays application. And it's been interesting that while the lighting industry, we had OLED lighting maybe 5 or 6, 7 years ago, and we've kind of moved away from it, the smartphone and displays industry has moved from LED into OLED displays, where it seems to be much better suited. What I'm going to have a look at now is an overview of the design architecture of LCD displays and the influences that have come from that. So we start with an LED string of ultra-thin LEDs and a light guide plate, which is essentially a plastic plate which has these light extraction features, very highly engineered, which means as the light comes through the plate, hits one of these dots or light extraction features, it's reflected upwards to give the illumination to the LCD panel. In addition to this, there's a reflector at the bottom to reflect any light which bounces down. There's a diffuser to improve the uniformity, and a brightness enhancement film to control the beam angle. This then goes through the LCD panel, which includes 2 polarizers, the color matrix, and the LCD controller to give the final image for the smartphone. The core component of the surface of light is called a backlight unit, and that became quite an influence for us as we were developing our technology. So looking at the paradigm shift, what do I mean by a paradigm? First off, I see it as a kind of very set way of working, an understanding of how to achieve a certain goal. And when I left Apple and I moved to Ireland, I was reflecting on my time at Philips and at Apple and working out, and it was within that reflection that I realized that a paradigm shift was needed in the OLED lighting industry. What the lighting industry needed was an ultra-thin surface light source, not a light source which used OLED technology. This was a really important kind of difference in approach and changing the paradigm of how we achieve this. And I was in a position where I had the unique insight from the smartphone display sector where I'd seen that in order to achieve a product which looks like an OLED lighting module but solve those key problems, we could re-engineer advanced smartphone displays technology which uses LED as a light source and solve a lot of the limitations of the performance and also the manufacturing cost. And so this is what we set out to do, to revive the vision of OLED lighting, to achieve all of those beautiful installations and light sources and luminaires which were previously only achievable with OLED lighting. And so we essentially made a list of all of the things that we loved about OLED and all of the things that were limiting the technology. And we kept everything we loved and we worked to re-engineer using smartphone displays technology to address all of those limitations. And that was 2.5 years ago that we started. And just this week, we're launching Hikari Square, which uses LED technology for a final product which looks like an OLED and is still ultra thin at only 3.2 millimeters and a 10 by 10 centimeter surface area. But it uses LED technology, so it has that performance, it has the light output, the energy efficiency, and the lifetime, which is required by the lighting industry, which performs in a way that is going to be suitable for all applications of luminaire and lighting design. And so we feel that we've really achieved what we set out to do. We've realized that ambition of reviving that vision of OLED lighting, and by bringing to market a product which enables a new generation of luminaire design and of lighting design. So I guess the moral of the story for me is that so often we have a really clear vision of the final product, the final solution that we want to achieve. And as engineers, we're so often siloed to like set out on a path and look at developing a single direction, a single technology. But often we need to kind of take a step back and look at different ways of achieving the same goals, looking at different industries and understanding what we can bring in from different areas to achieve a similar final product to an even better standard, to an even even better finished and final product. And so that's where I'm going to leave it today. Thank you so much for coming to listen to the talk. We're upstairs in stand 10, and I'd love to talk to you more about smartphone displays technology and how it's taken us to where we are now. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Matt. Sorry about that, grabbing the mic. I made it a bit loud, didn't it? Okay, so thank you very much for joining us down here. Thank you, Matt. We'll be sending everybody up to stand 10 to see you later. So we've got more of the same today, 15-minute presentations. You can watch them live on YouTube if you want. You can watch them live on Facebook. But what we found was really great yesterday is there's loads of people joining us here in the basement studio, as we're now christening it. It's not just a basement, it's a studio. We had about 40, 50 people at the peak yesterday. So if you're watching in your office, come down this afternoon, join in one of the presentations. Up next, once we've had a quick break, is going to be Gavril Papadiotis, who's going to be talking about lighting design through the lens. It's a combination of photography, lighting, and I've seen the slides. They're excellent. Thank you very much. See you in a minute. Okay, so we're back, we're live. We're going to have a quick word from our sponsor following his brilliant presentation. Just a quick video. Okay, that's Lightly Tech, our sponsor for the live stream, upstairs in booth 10. I saw the advert 20 times yesterday. I really like the music. I spent the rest of the night after the show last night working on dance routine, which I may be previewing later. But before that, hold your breath. We're over to our next speaker, Gavril Papadiotis. Round of applause.
Right. Hi, guys, and thank you for joining me today. As Martin said, and thank you so much for the invitation, guys, Martin and Sharon, to be here. My name is Gavril Papadiotis, and I'm a London-based architectural and lighting design photographer and content creator. But let me explain. This is not my big fat Greek wedding kind of moment, but photography does come from the Greek roots photos, which is genitive of phos, that means light, and graphy, which is representations by means of light, which is a drawing. So together, photography translates literally as drawing with light. Going back to the first image, in case you had a chance to see it, this is a photo I took a few years ago at the House of the Black Madonna in Prague. And it's a cubist building, and basically this light bulb staircase, in my mind, shows the harmony that exists between architecture and lighting, and how photography can be used to actually truly capture that. So today, I would like to talk to you about how I see lighting design and photography and architecture through my own viewfinder, and how I create not just images but also design and visual content for the projects that I work on. Photography's main instrument is a camera, and even though a camera has been the perfect perspectivist tool, it has the ability to detach itself from reality and produce also mental images, not just replicate reality itself. Cameras allow us to manipulate light and time in order to create memorable moments in a unique way, which bears great resemblance to how we as lighting designers use contrast and color, light and darkness to create both unique spaces and also memorable experiences. What we selectively choose to light or take a photo of is basically what we want for people to notice in a photo. And this is how you draw their attention to specific parts of an image. And don't get me wrong, perspective is everything. This was all Tower Bridge, by the way, at different times of the year. There are so many ways to manipulate an image in order to convey our message. And nowadays, with digital software, we actually can create completely new work by just taking like a very, very simple photo. Sometimes just for the fun of it, to be honest with you. So images have these amazing capabilities of actually casting a new light on the everyday. So I want to take some time and actually walk you through this image that I took some time ago, and it ain't modern, and just walk you through the process of how it was created and the message that I wanted to convey with this photo. So I hope that the first thing that people notice when they see this photo is the girl in the red dress. She's actually standing in the brighter part of the image, which actually draws people's attention to that specific part of the image, and the red dress is like very, very striking. Now, what I've actually done is I've long exposed the photo, so people that are actually passing by are silhouettes instead of actual people, so they're not as distracting from the main focal point of the photo. As you look a bit to the left, in the bottom left corner, there is a man kind of standing there. He's kind of a bit in the dark, and basically there is a leaf lobby in the back left as well, which actually doesn't have much interest, so naturally your eye kind of follows the architecture. It goes up on the left-hand side and then kind of follows the curve of the staircase and just draws you back to the main focal point, which is the girl. Now, it's actually funny because the man in that corner, I had not really planned for him to be there or actually stand there for so long. He probably noticed that there was someone at the bottom of the staircase for probably like 10, 15 minutes, like staring up. So he started looking there, which kind of added to the story. And it's funny because a few years later, I actually read that what Jean Renoir had said, that when you take photos, you control everything, you plan everything, but you always leave a door open for reality to enter. And kind of that door, that man standing there, kind of added to the story. This was, by the way, the original photo. So what I want to say with that is that carefully exposing a photograph and selectively editing the final image is basically creating points of interest the same way as we as lighting designers light a space, which means that we get to choose what to light, we get to choose what to leave in shade, and basically everything in between. While working as an architectural lighting designer, I realized the importance of having a really nice record of one's work. Basically, not just finished photos of the end project, but also a comprehensive record of the whole design process. And it took me a while to realize, but I was actually subconsciously putting a lot of time and effort in learning how to aesthetically and technically combine the two things that I love the most, which is photography and lighting design. So now with my design experience and passion for photography and film, I'm working with lighting designers, architects, interior designers, and lighting manufacturers, offering architectural, interior, and product photography and content creation services. I'm going to walk you through a few projects of mine. So the first one started from France. This is a convent located in Toulouse. And I could literally go on for hours and hours of how social media nowadays have changed our ability to not only access visual content, but also our perception of what is expected of designers and the design content that people are actually looking from us. So it's very critical not really to just take a single photo and just pass on a message, because I mean an image is 1,000 words, but it's very important to actually have a series of images that actually show the story, give context, and explain to people where we are, what we're doing, and why we're actually doing it. And don't get me wrong, there is, people need to see those wide-angle shots that show the lighting at its best, and basically seeing how a space has been changed by the amazing lighting design. I mean, just look at these amazing ceilings and how the whole space has been changed completely. Now there is the before and after shots, which are always kind of useful, because it actually shows you how a space was and how with lighting it was actually changed to bring life back to the ceiling frescoes in the ceiling frescoes. And what I also try to do is, most of the time, is try to capture intriguing details, because sometimes we focus so much on the bigger picture that when we go away, we realize that we don't really have specific lighting effects that we want to show to our clients or use them for future reference. So it's very critical to actually have those. Even the lighting equipment, the wiring, how everything was carefully concealed and tucked away and hidden within the architecture or joinery pieces as well. Now, one was very critical, as long as the client brief kind of allows it for it, is actually adding a couple of people within the shots, because that actually gives like a more of a human sort of element in the photos. And usually what you want to do, especially with spaces where it's really difficult to tell of scale, having someone appreciating the space or experiencing it, it actually gives you two things: a sense of scale, and also it adds sentiment to the photo. Now, lastly, what I do sometimes is I try to take these behind-the-scene kind of videos, which actually show the whole design process and helps people kind of relate to both ourselves and our work by just seeing how we design, how we photograph, what's actually happening behind the scenes, and how maybe something works, how things are looking, but how it actually everything just took place. Just going to let it play on a bit longer. Sorry, there's another video. Okay, so on this one, in this specific project, this is a video, so I'm just going to pause it a bit. In this specific project, the ceiling was actually lit with a lighting sequence, which means that you have uplighters that were actually lighting the whole ceiling, and then individual spot picking up specific parts of the frescoes, which actually was telling a story and was actually pointing you to the right direction each and every time. What happened with this project is that because the whole sequence was like 5 minutes long, I ended up taking photos of each and every scene, which then allowed me to create an image and a video transition that actually has much higher image resolution, and also it gives you more creative storytelling at the end, and you can control the time and how long everything is going to appear, and hopefully that's going to start playing. Oh, music. And again, video is the first approach to a project like that. But again, with images, you have high resolution, more control afterwards, and you can, just with Photoshop these days, you can actually do amazing things. Moving into another project. Yeah, there you go. This is actually a new permanent exhibition at Bletchley Park, and it traces the history of the Bombe machine, which you might be familiar with if you watch the movie A Limitation Game. So what I tried to do with this project is basically try to capture the visuals and images and the wide angles that the visitor would actually experience when visiting the exhibition. And honestly, starting again with wide angle shots that actually guide you through the space and make you feel that you're almost being in that space yourself. And kind of tracing how you would, when you visit it, what exactly you would see in every single turn. Then the next step was to actually focus a bit more on the display units, because these can sometimes get lost in a big wide-angle shot. Then move even closer and actually focus on the lighting details and see how carefully the wiring and all the LEDs and the spotlights have been integrated within the displays, because sometimes it's critical to how everything was done, not just the end result. And then making sure that I take another step back this time, and I capture specific exhibits like the Bombe machine and one of the tracing machines that actually show context. So you see the lighting, but you see in the background items that are recognizable and you can relate to the space itself. And since there was like a video projection in the film, in the exhibition, what I tried is I actually capture different sort of stills of the same video, which I then managed to superimpose again in post-production, just because I thought that having a monochromatic image with those sort of moving fast numbers, it actually works better as an end result. The next project, excuse me, it's an exterior one, and this is capturing the new lighting, color-changing lighting scheme of the Debenhams facade in London. And again, starting with wide-angle shots, this time captured around dusk, because the deep blue hues that you get at that time actually really complement the warm white lighting that's been used for interiors and the facade itself. And again, detail shots, both of the lighting equipment, but also of how intricate the design is of the facade, just to show you how the two interact together and how they change when the lighting changes. Now, what I actually have found is, again, as the previous video said, with the previous video, I actually took quite a few different shots of different sort of color variations of the facade, which I then superimposed again in post and again made this animation, which actually worked great, because what you can do is you can get away with images that you can manipulate from your home without an engineer present, without site access, and you can control the time, the color, the sequence, and almost show to a client or a potential another collaboration exactly what the system is capable of. And you can change its speed, you can change how smooth it goes, you can practically change everything without even. Now, the next project is an interior one, and these are some guest rooms in a hotel in London, the Bloomsbury Hotel. And basically, same strategy, wide-angle shots, detail shots, everything just to show how the design is tied together. And then what I actually try to do is get these side-by-side shots that work great when you want to show design consistency and color scheme variation. These are two different rooms. The one the rat has signed with the blue scheme, it actually has much more daylight, so you can see a blue cast on the photos. But I specifically didn't want to remove that because it feels a bit more natural than actually warm white fading everything. Now, the tricky thing is when you want to overcome the vast difference that you have in lighting exposure and also color temperature difference between interior and exterior lighting, is basically take multiple exposures of the same shot and then try to sort of blend these carefully together to actually get that end result. And again, if you want to get that sort of high dynamic range and extreme detail in both extreme shadow and highlight areas, you need to do that, and then carefully also remove distracting elements like a fire alarm, smoke detector, sockets, a cable that was actually you didn't notice in the panning of the photo shoot, everything really. This is probably the last project that I'm going to show you today. This is doing a photo shoot of a custom luminaire designed for a project in Greece. And what we discussed with the design team is actually capturing the projects really close and be able to actually show how these luminaires are going to be used and how they're designed to cues and inspiration from the space itself. So when I first visited the site-specific showroom, I was very impressed by how the architecture actually was forming the perfect background for us to actually photograph these fittings. We had different designs, both switched on and switched off. Where we have variations, I capture all the different ones, again in the same exact corner. And again, using literally the architecture and existing lighting, making sure to capture those custom luminaires in sort of more unique angles to actually show how they can, they can be used and how they can add value to the architecture. This was actually my favorite one. It's a custom-designed battery-operated lander, which I made sure to photograph both as a luminaire but also as an art piece itself. Kind of running out of time, so I'm going to skip a couple of slides. But this is just to show you how social media, you can take photos, and if you edit them, you can actually increase how people interact with it. Now, in my line of work, I see both lighting design and photography moving in parallel. Basically, they're complementary and related, both as an art and a science. So the fact that there is always to learn and ways to always improve in both crafts, I actually find it very fascinating because having this continuous learning curve means that you always get better, but you will never both master them. I mean, there are so many things to do and learn every single time. So what I try to do is I practice on a daily basis and I try different types of photography that uniquely influence my kind of commercial work as a lighting design and architectural photographer. So for example, I like street photography because it can be extremely spontaneous. It keeps me on my toes because you want to time the perfect moment when you capture people walking in like light shafts or creating silhouettes. And then you always want to look at what other people see. You want to get inspired by them. You want to use that creative mind that they have and kind of work on it and kind of learn new things yourself. And photography has the ability to reproduce, but it's very important to actually use it to even produce new content. Now, model photography can be quite intimate, and basically, I like the more you know a person, the easier you can actually create a content and photograph them. And it's the same with architecture, because basically, I like to test space at different times of the day, how it interacts, see how it changes with daylight, and how it transforms during the course of a single day. And last but not least, this is aerial photography. It gives you unique perspectives and the scale that you can capture from these vantage points, both of natural scenery but also of larger architectural elements. It helps you see the bigger picture. These are actually, I mean, on the left-hand side, that's a person in the center of the image. It's like an ancient theater in Greece. Now, I want to close up with just a recent project that I had the privilege of both working as a lighting designer and photographing in the end. This is the Syntagma Square in Athens. And just to show you, this is the shots that you can get from the ground, just walking around the square from two opposite sides. When you go up on a nearby bar rooftop, you actually get this vantage point, which is amazing. You can see the Parliament, you can see the Acropolis at the back. But basically, you would never be able to capture something like that before. So that gives you a tremendous power and sense of scale. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gavril. Thank you very much for that. It's clear to see that your combination of lighting designer and photographer really pays off for the images you take.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll be right back with the next presentation. Mark Sutton-Vane, who's going to talk about something enormous. Okay, see you in a minute. I've even got now I can walk on just as the song finishes. The only dance I've got in my head is, you know, the David Brent dance from the it just seems to fit to that music, so I'm forget the dancing. Okay, so our next speaker is Mark Sutton-Vane, and he's going to talk about a project that, looking at the images, looks stunning, but look, knowing the background to it, the scale is something else. Okay, Mark, welcome.
Thank you. It was a big project. It was a real experience and a real challenge, and it was real fun as well. It is the largest new cultural centre in the world. It's in Kuwait, and it has a site which has 5 complete museums on it and a whole load of other buildings and support structures that support the whole thing. We're lighting designers, Sutton-Vane Associates. We design lighting for ecclesiastical projects and cathedrals. We do really fun modern sculpture. We did a big chunk of the Olympic Park, now the Elizabeth Park here in London. And we do lots of displays and museums and projects like that. So when Cultural Innovations, the designers of this huge project, asked us, we thought, this is going to be great. And it was great. But it was a challenge. Big is the word. So it's now finished. It's now open to the public. There it is. And you walk in through that huge entrance. And you get on the site. And there's a museum there on the left. And another complete museum on the right. You see those tiny people in the distance. That gives you an idea of how big these buildings are. Because until you kind of see that, you don't realize. And so you walk on to the end of that photograph. And there's a couple more huge museums. And I love those stonking big sculptures because they just throw the whole scale completely out. I mean, they are huge, those green and blue and amazing sculptures. And you walk on. And there's more. And it's just huge. It is absolutely huge. So, we were really, really excited to be asked to do the light. 22,000 square meters of gallery. I mean, if you think that a normal museum gallery might be 200, 500 square meters, we had 22,000 square meters of galleries, plus all the support space, plus the educational spaces, plus the lecture theatres, plus all those other things went with it to make this amazing place work. The first thing we did is we looked at the daylight. This is Q8. The sun is bright. And we knew there would be problems where sun would be coming in and causing challenges. So we did a complete full sunlight analysis right throughout the year for every single gallery. This is just one. And this gallery's got windows down the side. You can probably sort of see there's bits of red creeping in. And when you look at the color, the red is kind of like thousands of lux. And so that kind of thing was not acceptable. So we worked closely with the exhibition designers, Cultural Innovations, and with the architects, SSH, and developed daylight management systems. Part of the displays, a lot of the displays were going to be quite modern things. So we were lucky. We didn't have very much exhibits that were going to fade in bright light, and that made our life a lot easier as lighting designers. But the project was incredibly fast. It was so fast that it opened in about 2 years after we were commissioned. And when we were commissioned, they hadn't dug a single bit of anything in the ground at all. So in order to do such a huge thing so fast, we had to design the lighting before the exhibits were designed. Because the contractor, the electrical contractor, had to start wiring it and building it. And the thing of that is, you need a lot of person power to actually build it. So they had to site, even though what was going to be designed or chosen. So we designed a kind of generic kit of parts that could light.
Okay, welcome back. Extended pause there, everybody. We were just sorting out a couple of issues. We are back up. We're back live. And our next speaker is joining us from one of our partner organisations, the British Institute of Interior Design. Please take the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about how to improve the perceived value of an interior with good lighting and how this can affect human psychology. How color and lighting have influenced people's behavior has become recently a very popular topic, and how we are now understanding how lighting is very important for human behavior. I prefer to say, actually, rather than understanding, I prefer to say we are reconnected with nature and the lighting cycle. In fact, if you think that since the beginning of our life on Earth has been such crucial for every living beings, and we follow this lighting cycle, the circadian rhythm. We are following this biological process. We have an internal clock, 24-hour internal clock, that sits at the back of our brain, and we have these cycles, alternative cycles between awakeness and sleepiness. If we look at this image, during the course of the day, the light builds up its intensity. From a very soft yellow-orange intensity to its highest at noon. That's when the light becomes white, cool, crispy. And then after that, the sunlight wanes until dusk, when it becomes again very soft with a yellow glow. If you notice, we are exposed during the day twice to yellow light. And actually, we see things, we are more sensitive to yellow light. Although it has recently proved that our eyes, therefore our brain, is more intrigued to blue light. What that means, it means that by regulating the intensity of blue light, our body reacts differently. So we can help people to feel more relaxed or become more alert. Now, if we follow this as a human body, we follow this lighting circle, it would make sense to follow this lighting circle as well in our interiors, right? Well, actually, we don't. So many interiors, if you see them, that don't have the kind of intensity of light and color lights. And we are every day exposed to artificial lights, and through the course of the day with just one color light, one intensity. And we have technology nowadays that can help us. You know, technology can create this software control system, but if you notice, any interiors is still using flat lighting. So light intensity and colors are very important factors that can impact how we perform inside a space in both biological and physiological terms. So let's have a look how this impacts in biological terms. Light can improve the way we sleep. Light can disrupt our sleep. As I said before, just regulating the intensity of blue lights, that can change how we react to things. And it's been proved that it's very hard to fall asleep under blue lights. Light can improve our moods, and light can stabilize our circadian rhythms. In terms of physiological terms, light decreases depression, improve human performance, and help us to adapt to our environment. So what are the ingredients that we can use to change our human biological and physiological impact? We can use brightness. So we know there is amount of light given by the lighting source, and the brighter lights intensify our emotions. Low light keep emotions steady. Now, it's been researched, and if you want to take a very important decision, it's better to be in a room with very soft light. So keep that in mind when you're taking important decisions. Then we have hue, that is actually the real color or shades. And color created by artificial light can evoke different emotions that can affect our body in different ways. Research is done with a different amount of people, and these people has been put in a room for a certain amount of time, and it's been proved that if are exposed to warm lights or to cool light, the body will react in a different way. If they are exposed to warm lights, their skin conductance and their heart rate will increase very quickly. If they are exposed to cool lights, their heart rate will slow down. So let's have some examples of what kind of color light we can use. We can use blue lights that can be a relaxing effect. Again, keeping in mind about the intensity of the blue light. Red light can cause an exciting effect, and green light can cause a pleasant effect. This is because green as a color sits in the middle of the color spectrum and is a balanced color. Then we have the saturation, that's intensity of color. More saturated amplify the effects on our emotion, while muted colors can make our emotion feel less strong. Another important element to consider is the direction of light. So it can transform the space and impact how we live and we perform inside the space. For instance, if we want to recreate a tense atmosphere, in terms of lighting effects, the light will be direct from the above, and we give a not uniform distribution. To create a relaxed environment, we should lower overhead lighting with some lighting around the perimeter of the room and using some warm color tones, but the light will be not uniform in terms of distribution. If we need to create a space where we're going to work, so we need some visual clarity, then we need some bright light on the work plane with less around the perimeter, and we can use in this case wall lighting and cooler color lights. In this case will be uniform, the distribution. To create a spaciousness, we can use bright light and lighting on the walls or possible when above the ceiling. And the lights will be quite distributed in a uniform way. If we want to create a room that's got more privacy feel, then we can lower the level of the lights, and we can have a little perimeter light and creating contrast between darkness area with light. In this case, the distribution will be not uniform. Choosing the right lights is not only important for our well-being and for our psychology, but also to improve the perceived value of any interior. Lighting can be used to highlight any architecture feature of your building, can be used to enhance the paintings, the texture, or creating some focal points. So let's have a look what elements we can use inside here. We can use the lighting to add drama. We can create a kind of theatrical theme just using the light with different layers. If we look at this image, the feel that you have is very relaxing and very welcoming, but just few lights layers in there. And they're hitting a particular point, like the fruit bowl on the table and the path on the stairs. So just few lights, but they're creating a better atmosphere than having flat lights. Also, light can help you to conceal any imperfection or snags that you might have. On the contrary, let's have a look at these two images. If we use flat lights, like the first image, the one over there, you can see there's no emotion. All the lights are the same layers. They all are the same intensity. The scheme of the overall design is flat. And if you use something like that, you have to be very careful on the type of furniture, texture, and elements that you put inside, because every single detail is going to be highlighted. On the opposite, the other image, you can see again just few layers of lights, but they are hitting a specific focal point, like the window and the fireplace. In this case, just using different layers of lights, you can create a very welcoming atmosphere, very relaxing environment. And if you have some furniture, they are not the most luxurious one, you can end imperfection because you are directing people's eyes to something else. With lighting, you can increase the perception of the space around you. You can play with light on a vertical surface, so with wall washing or wall lights. And for instance, in this case, if you have a very nice garden, no one wants to see a black canvas in front of your eyes. So if you have that highlight with just few layers, even just to give the effect that your space is bigger. And you can do as well if you have not a garden with just a wall with a window. So you can increase the perception that the space is bigger around you. Another important thing is to use the right color temperature for your interiors. As interior designers, we use a warm color temperature, a warm color scheme, or cool color scheme. And it's important that the light and temperature we use will match that. In this image, where the clients wanted to recreate a holiday house in London, where with blue, white, and gray colors, we use some lights that more than 3,500 Kelvin, nearly 4,000. That's because with a white light, you can enhance the real color and texture of the material. So in this case, the marble flooring. Using some warm lights here would have created the wrong effect and give a more yellowish undertones. Then lighting can be used inside interiors to define a path, and this can be done from the very beginning of the process with the client deciding what feel he wants to give when people enter inside a space. So you can guide people's attention towards a particular path around the house. And again, in this way, you can highlight any particular architecture elements, any feature in your space, and create the nice welcoming effect. Then you can use lighting to define different areas of a space. Nowadays, lots of people live in open spaces with kitchen, living, and dining, all one big space. So we can use lighting to actually define a particular area where a particular task is being held. In this case, the cooking area has been defined by a coffer ceiling. Now, as I said previously, the way we use color lights can influence our emotions and our psychology. But as anything in life, that has to be used with moderation. We have very good examples here where they use the same color lights, purple, violet lights with yellow lights. But in the first, the effect they're giving is the opposite on increasing the value. Here they are decreasing the value of the space. They're using the light with very strong intensity. The warm light and cool light are very close to each other. There's no definition of area, And instead to enhancing the welcoming, actually is giving a very uncomfortable feeling. As opposite, the other one, the lighting has been used with very good moderation. The intensity is right. It's been used as well to define particular areas. So there's been the light color has been used in different parts of the space. And the effect is very welcoming, very relaxing, and as well giving a very luxurious effect. So just with the lighting, using the right way, you can change how a space is felt. So to conclude, we saw how lighting is still underestimated, but is still a very important and powerful tool that can affect not only psychological and for well-being, but can improve the way we see our space using some, and we can play with colors, with different intensity, and with different light directions. Thank you.
Thank you, Cinzia. Thank you very much. Great to hear from an interior design point of view. Okay, we are going to jump straight into our next presentation. As soon as we get Christian wired up, we're going to, again, it's talking about playful design. Okay, see you in a minute. Okay, we are going to continue on the theme of value. Our next speaker is Peter Fordham from DHA, and he's going to talk to us about time. Peter.
Hello, thanks. Thanks very much for coming down to see me. My name's Peter Fordham from DHA Designs in London. So I'm an independent lighting designer. So Martin, where do I start? Sorry, didn't give you the intro to that. No, that's fine there. So I'm going to talk to you briefly, slightly tongue-in-cheek, about tunnel vision, how to manage your client's expectations on a diminishing budget. I'm going to tell you what to do when a client wants something like this, but the reality is all they can afford is this. My journey starts at Gatwick Airport, at the Sky Bridge installation, and I'm sure many of you have been across this. 2015, there was an amazing sound installation installed across this bridge, playing back sounds from the Yangtze River to completely interactive. It's quite impressive. And last summer, I got a call completely out of the blue from the sound designer who designed it and installed it. Now, the sound designer, looking for a lighting designer. The sound designer had been approached by a brand designer. The brand designer, in turn, is working for a developer. The CEO of the development company had seen and loved the Skybridge sound installation, and they wanted to incorporate something like that as an immersive environment with lighting for a new project of theirs, which was a rather prestigious development in the centre of London, including 3 pedestrian tunnels, which they wanted to combine the combination of sound and light. Quite a challenge. So just to complete the jigsaw, the lighting designer was introduced to the brand designer. Now, the brand designer at that stage had already come up with some concepts for the developer. And when they shared them with us, it was pretty exciting, really. They were showing some really amazing images of dynamic, kinetic lighting environments, really immersive, high-end, and what we thought was high budget. They also referred to this project, which is the Place Plaza in Beijing, which is quite old. It's a huge, huge high-resolution video screen that stretches across the shopping center in the Beijing area. So seeing these images as concept, I was quite excited to do something like this right in the center of London. At the beginning of a project and with a new client, this is my first question: what's the lighting budget? And this is the response I got. Okay, I get a response like that, followed by this: it's all about the lighting, and I get a blank response and a sharp intake of breath, because I don't know about you lot, but I hear this quite a lot, and sometimes it's not the best start to a project, as I'll explain. This is the site, and this is really central. On this corner here is Knightsbridge Tube Station. Really amazing. So the whole centre was being developed over a period of 3 years, and the tunnels wrap around Brompton Road and Sloane Street. Really quite exciting, I thought. And we were getting lined up for what was going to be an amazing project. But in reality, those tunnels actually turned out to be this. It's a hoarding. And it's an enclosed hoarding, or partial hoarding, but it's public. But unlike that place in Beijing, the ceiling's only less than 2.5 meters tall. All right, okay, so I went back and said, are you sure there's no specific lighting budget as such? And the response was, well, how much is it going to cost? Okay, well, we can do that with our friends in the industry. We can cost the schemes. So we gave them 3 options at first. The first was the high-resolution scheme. We knew this was going to be far too much for them. But nevertheless, we suggested that to get the high-resolution video images, you needed a screen of kinds mounted onto the ceiling. We explained the idea of LED pitch and resolution, and that obviously goes up in terms of the cost of the screens. The tighter the pitch, the more expensive the screens, but the better resolution. And we showed them this rather amazing project that's been around for years, with a slightly higher height than 2.5 meters in Las Vegas. And this was all fitting the bill of how the concept had been delivered. And of course, designed by Darc, which is always great, showing a rather dull grayscale image on the left and a rather exciting false color rendering that obviously needs some explanation to the clients. But nevertheless, dumbing it down a little bit, we suggested, well, if you can't afford that, more than likely, perhaps we could create our own mesh on the ceiling where we can have video images still on a lower resolution using strings of light, such as the IW Flex from Philips. And as inspiration, we turned to some fantastic work by Claudia Paz design, showing more often, it's just the explanation of the resolution of the images that you could get with this. So it's not as strong as a pure video, but it could still be fun. And of course, dumbing it down even further, back to Dialux to show what it would look like in a grayscale space or psychedelic false color image. And then lastly, we suggested, well, if you can't afford that, perhaps we could still create some dynamic and immersive lighting using direct view illumination, using the LED tubes. I nearly gave the game away then. And we suggested, again, the type of resolution, thanks to Claudia Paz's design again, would be a low resolution image, but still creating quite a lot of fun, and you can play with color and patterns that could still be read. And in Dialux, of course, here we go, just to get the reality there in our tunnels. So we then added up the scores and the costs, and no surprise, the LED media screens were completely off the scale, and media strings, pretty expensive too, over the length of the tunnels that we were looking at, and even the 4-foot LED media tubes on the left were relatively expensive. So when we showed this back to our new client, the response we got was, but all of these are far too expensive. Well, there's no surprise. And they said, what can you achieve for this tiny fraction of coins here? Okay, finally we've got a budget, which is where we would like to be at the beginning of our work. Okay, so when we get a budget, we split it, just like this, without going to an electrical contractor to get costs for wiring, etc. If a client gives us a lighting budget, we say that includes the supply cost of the luminaires and the installation. It's a 50-50 split. So for our little budget, we split it in half, and that's how much that we can design to in terms of the fixture costs. So with this amount of money, what can I actually achieve? Oh yes, sorry. The next question was, what do you mean you don't supply the light fixtures? The brand designer hadn't worked with an independent lighting designer before, so we had to go back to square one to explain that we are providing a lighting scheme for them, for an electrical contractor to go out and purchase. Another sharp intake of breath. So what can we afford? We couldn't afford any of these. The LED screens, forget it. LED nodes, no way. Direct view, no chance. In fact, with the budget that we finally had, all we could achieve was a fluorescent batten. All's not lost, because at times like this, I don't know about you lot, but I tend to turn to my lighting heroes for inspiration, and one of them is Dan Flavin. And I don't know if any of you, I hope most of you are familiar with his work, because it's quite inspiring what this artist can do with very, very simple, low technology. It's a fluorescent tube wrapped in a colored gel, and it really creates a saturated, static environment. So I thought, yeah, okay, all's not lost, I can do this. But what about the sound installation? So I thought, well, if I'm using fluorescent tubes, if you can graphically interpret the sound wave, the pattern you get, the graphic pattern you get with the sound wave, and expand that. My image on the right, I was sort of getting there with the various lengths of fluorescent tubes. And I thought maybe if I arrange my lights on the ceiling to graphically represent the sound wave, it can link in with the sound installation. I thought that was incredibly clever. And on the fixtures, well, with the fluorescence, obviously nothing's going to change. It's going to be a static color that we can apply to a fluorescent tube. Really low tech. Encapsulite UK have been doing this for a long time, and giving deep dyed sleeves with a good choice of colors that will last for the duration of the project. So, with that in mind, it's back to Dialux again, a nice grayscale render to give my client the idea of the patterns that we're creating. This is my sound wave on the ceiling. And then I can apply with a little bit of artistic license, some color, going from pinks through the blues and reds from one end of the spectrum to the other, and a repeated pattern. So nothing changes, you change, you're moving through the space, and the color around you changes. So taking that onto plan, you can see that what I was trying to create here, and this would be a repeated pattern through all of the tunnels. So I felt like I was getting somewhere in homage to Dan Flavin. Good news, the client likes it. Great, I said, and it's on budget. It's fantastic. I'm really pleased with that. It was involving the client through this whole design process was the key. So having chosen the colors for them, I was then asked, would it be okay if the client chose the colors? Which is fine. It's all part of the design process. It's all part where my value is being added to the project. Oh, and by the way, the sound installation has been cut. So, okay, all right, well, maybe nobody else will notice my lovely graphical representation of the sound wave, but there is going to be no sound. Never mind. Okay, we'll keep it as it is. So, choice of fixture. This is what we went with. The other thing I needed to add was that the project lasts for 3 years only when the actual development takes place. After 3 years, the hoarding's removed and all my lights are removed, so it's relatively temporary. Because it's essentially a construction site, all of the fittings needed to be 110 volts, and because it's public, even though it's in Knightsbridge, they had to be vandal resistant. So with our help from Encapsulite, we chose this fixture, the MT-IK10 IP67 impact resistant waterproof fixture, which is attached to the ceiling with a couple of pretty sturdy clips. And we used the satin diffuser and a coloured sleeve inside each of these fixtures. So far, so good. And this is the client's choice of colours. Not radically different from ours, but nevertheless, it's now going from a light orange through the spectrum into purples, into sky blues. And on a plan, you can see here, which is, well, the colours don't come out very well, but you get the idea. And then the client asked me, what will it actually look like? So there's only so much Dialux can do. So we turned to an external renderer who can then build a simple model of the fixtures as well, and we can put in the sleeves and get a much more accurate render for the client. So we showed it in daytime, and then slightly more saturated at night. And they were quite happy with this. So with this, the scheme was signed off, and we could get the electrical contractor on board, and everything was going to be ordered, and everything happy. So in reality, a few months later, or weeks later, this is a pretty fast turnaround project. It looked like this on a very rainy night in January this year. And I was actually quite happy with this, a very low-tech solution to a bit of a challenging problem. And the saturation of the colours works incredibly well, I believe. And so here you can see the difference of the blue saturations and the orange saturations as you walk through this space. And I put together a panoramic shot, so the colours are static as you walk through. And when I was down there doing this, it was quite inspiring to have kids taking photographs of each other in the light, and it's now become the rainbow corridor on Instagram. I've got a little video to show you with some sound. So, the moral of this story. So when a client says to you, or a designer, there is no specific lighting budget as such, followed by, it's all about the lighting, don't believe them. It's all about the money. Actually, it's all about the value a lighting designer can give to a project, regardless of the size of the budget. And that's the task that you've got to do to keep our industry alive. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I love a good story with a moral at the end. That's brilliant. And that's a great rule and a fantastic bit of creative design. Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, we'll be back in just a second with our next speaker. Please stay tuned.
and a tissue.
Hello, my name's Karen van Creveld. I've been a lighting designer for more than 20 years, and I have recently begun a PhD at UCL looking into the effects of light on our health and well-being. My talk today will focus on 5 principles of healthy lighting and the corresponding known effects on our non-image forming functioning and hence on our health and well-being. In 1948, the World Health Organization defined health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease. And for those of us interested in lighting, we've never before been more interested in how to use light to benefit our well-being. Recent discoveries and advances in photobiology have shown that the retina is far more complex than we once imagined, with different photoreceptors and different pathways leading to multiple parts of the brain, and having an effect not only on vision, but on many other processes. And this has led the CIE to define 5 principles of healthy lighting. The first one is that the daily light dose received by people in industrial countries might be too low. And here we're talking about light intensity. Then we have healthy light is inextricably linked to healthy darkness, and this is about the duration of light. Then we have light for biological action should be rich in the regions of the spectrum to which the non-visual system is most sensitive, and clearly we're talking about spectrum here. Then we have the important consideration in determining light dose is the light received at the eye, both directly from the light source and reflected from surrounding surfaces, and we're talking about distribution. And finally, the timing of light exposure influences the effect of the dose timing. And guess what? We're talking about timing. The report also suggests that these 5 principles should lead to a renewed emphasis on architectural daylighting. Daylight is rich in those areas of the spectrum and bright at those times of the day that seem most important for these processes. Now, before we get on to talking about these 5 principles in any detail, I wanted to just show you this slide to demonstrate the complexity of the subject we're talking about and the complexity of light's impact on humans, which really takes 3 mechanisms to deliver. So firstly, we have light through the skin, light through our visual system, and then light through our image-forming functions. And the traditional definition of light identifies it as electromagnetic radiation that stimulates vision. However, we now know conclusively that photoreception in the eye leads not only to vision, but also to effects on physiology, mood, and behavior. And these effects are termed non-visual or non-image forming. Now, I'm just skipping through the next 2 slides because we have a very strict timekeeper over here. And I won't have much time to talk to you about the structure of the retina or the pathways leading to the brains. But if anyone's interested, please do get in touch and I can put you, pass you the relevant literature. Right, the first thing we have to say is about intensity. Now, for more than 100 years, we've focused on developing artificial lighting sources to meet our visual needs, and in the misguided belief that the only purpose of light entering the eye was to enable us to see. However, we now know conclusively that light does much more than this. But still, our current light technologies, our lighting standards, our applications, all have to do and all are designed to meet a small part of the retina, the fovea's response to incoming light. And this has led us to design our internal environments to light levels that bear no resemblance whatsoever to the light levels that we would experience outdoors. So for example, the recommended standard of illuminance for an office, a modern office these days, is between 300 and 500 lux. And this is deemed to be sufficient to enable us to undertake most visual tasks that are required. However, as you can see on the spectrum I've done, if we go outside and under a bright, sunny blue sky, the illuminance level that we would expect to reach is in the region of 100,000 lux. And even on a dull day, under an overcast sky, we're looking at 10,000 lux. Following the revolutionary discovery of melanopsin and the intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells about 20 years ago, we now understand that in addition to vision, light incident on the retina has a profound effect on our health and well-being because it sets the timing of our biological clock and promotes entrainment to the local time on Earth. Consequently, I think that we must acknowledge that the requirement for light in our built environment is no longer limited to providing for vision. However, this raises the question of how much light we need. I'm just giving you an indication here that throughout the day, this is a typical day and a typical day's light exposure. So when it comes to how much light we need, unfortunately, there is as yet no agreement about the lighting that we need to enable our non-visual systems to work optimally. What is clear, though, is that the light levels under which we evolved for millions of years are so dramatically higher than those which we provide for our indoor environments that I think this must give us an indication to start rethinking our whole light environment. I mean, the images that I'm showing you here are typical of what a working person experiences through the day. And as you can see, the light levels are pretty grim, pretty low, and we all feel dog-tired at 3 o'clock. So I've got about 10 minutes before you're all going to be falling asleep. Right, so how do we measure this light? Now, the other big disappointment, I'm going to say, is that we can't use traditional photometry to measure light for our non-image forming or non-visual functions. Like length, time, and mass, light is a physical quantity with its own SI unit, the candela. But unlike these other units of measurement, the definition of light incorporates the human element. So the sensitivity of the human visual system is not equal across all the wavelengths. And in order to quantify the radiometric energy that reaches the retina, it is weighted by the spectral sensitivity of the different kinds of photocells within the retina. And this has given rise to separate spectral sensitivity functions for the rods and the 3 types of cones. And the result of this is the basis of what we call the photometric system. So consequently, the human visual system is embedded in the very terms we use to measure and define light. And so when it comes to talking about light for our non-visual and non-image forming functions, traditional photometry cannot be used. We really have to deal and work with watts per meter squared, which is the raw radiometric data entering the eyes. Okay, we're on to now the next principle, which is that healthy light is inextricably linked to healthy darkness. And this has to do with our circadian system. And the circadian rhythms present in almost all plants and animals, including humans, are driven by circadian clocks, which regulate various biochemical, physiological, and behavioral processes. For example, our sleep-wake cycle, our alertness, hormone production, metabolism, gene expression, etc., all follow a rhythmic pattern throughout the day in tune with the light-dark cycle. And the circadian system is endogenous and self-sustaining, meaning that even without an external cue, it will continue to operate, but on a slightly longer than 24-hour basis, usually around about 24.2 hours, which does accumulate after some time. But however, in order for an organism to function efficiently within its environment, the circadian system is fine-tuned to the local light-dark pattern that happens because of the Earth's daily rotation. So in evolutionary terms, the purpose of the circadian system is to enhance the efficiency and survival of an organism by allowing them to anticipate and adapt to changing environmental conditions. So the circadian system is not just a passive system responding to the environment, it actually anticipates and is predictive of changes to come. Now, the most important thing to remember in all of this is that it's not light alone that sets the circadian rhythm. It's actually the pattern of light and dark together that create the right kind of contrast between each other and sets for timing of different processes to happen at distinct and predictable periods throughout the day. So light alone cannot sustain a healthy circadian system. Correctly timed darkness is needed to complete the system. Industrialized societies are no longer regulated by the daily pathway of the sun. On the contrary, we're living in round-the-clock lifestyles with very limited hours of true darkness and increasingly little exposure to daylight. In lighting terms, many of us are living in a perpetual state of twilight. And this has far-reaching effects on our health and well-being. Richard Hobday estimates that in industrialized societies, we're spending about 90% of our time in indoor environments. And this has far-reaching health implications on all elements of our health, the mechanism that goes through the skin, the eyes, and our non-image forming functions. So we're getting vitamin D deficiency, we're having an extreme escalation of myopia in children, and we can only imagine that we're having some detriment to our health and well-being on the non-visual side as well. And this situation is made even more serious by the worldwide escalation of urbanization that's happened in the last 10 years. And if one reads the statistics, they're quite terrifying, just how many people are becoming urbanized throughout the world. At the moment, about 50% of us live in urban environments, and this is set to escalate. And the issues connected with an urban environment not satisfying our circadian system and our non-visual system is only set to multiply. And in very dramatic terms, this upheaval of our evolutionary environment is being spoken about by people in the health and well-being world as a coming tsunami of chronic diseases, including cancers, type 2 diabetes, cognitive impairment, and depression. So on that cheery note, we are going to move on to the next principle of healthy lighting, which is that light for biological action should be rich in the regions of the spectrum to which the non-visual system is most sensitive, and we're talking here about the light spectrum. Now, these are some holiday pics that I took from the same position, gosh, I wish I was there still, showing from early morning, pre-dawn, to late at night, and they sort of follow a snake, queuing at the airport thing, to show you just how dramatic the change of light color is throughout the day. And I think this is something that we often don't, we are all aware of it, but we tend to generalize morning light, midday light, afternoon light. But actually, when you look at this, you can tell very clearly which time of the day it is. There's almost like a feeling about the color of the light. And the individual photoreceptors involved in both visual and non-image forming systems contribute to both systems. So it's not this clear-cut situation that our rods and cones operate on the visual system, and the intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells operate on the non-visual system. Actually, at some point, these different systems combine and their signals combine. This is the part that scientists really don't understand yet, and this is really the crux. The parts of the brain that are lit up by light are varied, and I think we are not even near to understanding the complexity of these. And so, just to quote, there was an international workshop on circadian and neurophysiological photometry in Manchester in 2013, and they concluded with regard to the spectrum that convincing evidence, I quote, convincing evidence for a single action spectrum explaining all circadian and neurophysiological effects under all conditions in humans and animals does not exist. In fact, there's unlikely to be one widely applicable action spectrum. Another thing we don't know. But what we do know is that the spectral content of daylight is suitable for both our visual and our non-image forming functions. Daylight contains all the wavelengths in the visible spectrum, plus a few extras, and it varies over the course of the day, synchronizing with our circadian rhythms. And with the exception of incandescent light, most artificial light sources emit their light in narrow bandwidth wavelengths. And the lighting industry has come up with the concept of correlated color temperature to give an approximate explanation for the appearance of white light. Now, as we in the lighting industry understand, two sources with very different spectral compositions can both be termed the same CCT value. When it comes to considering light for our non-image forming functioning, this is no longer useful. So CCT cannot be used when we're talking about non-visual effects. It's just not accurate enough. We need to really be talking about the actual spectral content of the light reaching the retina. I have to speed up. We're on to the 4th or the 7th, and we're talking about the principle of light distribution. And humans are diurnal species, exposed to light while engaged in cognitive tasks. And that means throughout the day, we're moving around in different environments, engaged with people, doing different things all the time. And I think we need to start thinking more about the actual lit environment, the reflected lit environment, and not so much about the source of light. Because in contrast to scientific research, which is undertaken in laboratories for obvious reasons, laboratory scientific work usually uses very narrow band light source. The occupants are often kept in the dark before the experiment. They are often have their eyes artificially kept open. They're sat in a very rigid position, and they're involved in a very controlled task. They're also really sat in a booth looking at an opal screen of light with no spatial differentiation. Now, this research is obviously essential to further our understanding of all these processes, but in no ways can this data be transferred to a real architectural environment, because that's not what we see. We see light that's reflected from all the surfaces and all the architecture around us, and I think it's the conscious modulation of light in connection with architecture which is what we really need to focus on. And these are some images where I think it's been done very beautifully. And I think you would agree that the quality of light just from these images, let alone being in the space, is an entirely different experience from telling somebody that it's a 300K light source. I don't think it makes much sense. And just going back really to the olden days of Richard Korth, I don't know if any of you came across him, 1982, Richard Korth, talking about spectrum. So it's way before many of you were around. And he talking about the spectral composition, and I'll just read the last part of his quote because of time. And he says it's the spectral reflectivity of the surfaces of our environment which largely controls the wavelength composition of light which enters the eyes. So again, I think we just need to extend our understanding of what we're talking about and beyond the lamp and the light source that we're dealing with. Right, and now we're on to the final of the 5th principles, which is the timing issue. Now, the same dose of light can elicit both positive and negative effects depending on when it is experienced. This is due to our biological circadian system, which in turn is influenced by our age, our gender, our geographical location, our prior light history, and our genetic chronotype. Now, according to Foster and Kreitzman in their book, Circadian Rhythms, I quote, "There have been hundreds of studies showing that a broad range of activities, both physical and cognitive, vary across the 24-hour day." So, for example, believe me, tooth pain is lowest in the morning. Believe it? Proofreading is best done in the evening. Labor pains usually start at night, and most natural births happen in the early hours of the morning. So it is likely that most of these systems are controlled or affected by our own circadian systems. Other examples of physiology and behavior have been shown to have a very standard and regular rhythmic 24-hour pattern, such as our core body temperature, our alertness, hormone production, blood pressure, etc. But I think what it says is that an organism is set up to operate differently at different times of day. And the most profound of these 24-hour systems is our sleep and alertness rhythm. And this varies amongst individuals, and the term chronotype has been devised to explain the differences between those who are biologically inclined to wake up early. They're termed larks, like birds who wake up early. They wake up early and they go to bed early. And on the other extreme, there are the owls who cannot go to sleep early and rarely wake before midday. And the rest of us are boringly in between. So it's 10 to 15% on either of the extremes, and the rest of us are about in the middle. And with the advent of electric lighting, modern society has resulted in a round-the-clock lifestyle where the natural connections between rest and activity and the environmental light and dark have been degraded and even at times broken. So instances where there's a rapid change in our sleep patterns, such as transmeridian travel, demonstrate the negative effects of what's called acute circadian disruption. We've all, I'm sure, experienced some jet lag and how rubbish we feel with it. The ramifications of chronic disruption of the circadian clock, that's long-term disruption, are only beginning to be understood, but we don't quite understand fully what the implications of that are. But even excluding some of these more extreme examples of circadian disruption, we have to look at our school start times and work start times often work against one circadian system. So, for example, we usually work on two timetables, one during the week where we wake up with the alarm and the other one on weekends where we have a lie-in, and therefore our rest period is more aligned with our natural circadian system. And the difference between these two timetables is what's called social jet lag. And this is particularly prevalent amongst teenagers. Anybody who has experience of teenagers will recognize this. And don't blame them, but they are biologically predisposed to go to sleep later and to wake up later. So asking a teenager to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning is like asking a 50-year-old to wake up at 5. They feel pretty much half asleep. So school times start at 8 or 8:30 with science and maths in the early part of the day are really designed to satisfy the alertness and awakeness of the teachers giving the lessons, not the teenage students sitting and listening to them. They're still asleep. Now, on a more serious note, living against one's circadian clock has metabolic consequences. And for example, social jet lag is associated with an increased body mass index. With every hour of social jet lag, the probability of being overweight or obese increases by 30%. That's with the same calorie intake. That's quite startling. I can just see the newest fad diet coming online. Also, on a more positive note, those larks amongst us are usually expected to have a more cheerful disposition because we're more attuned to our social time. Now, the last little point that I'm going to really quickly talk through is that in medicine, this timing issue is being used quite, is receiving quite a lot of information, so a lot of attention. So the timing at which we administer drugs and treatments has an effect on its outcome. For example, if we give somebody an anti-flu vaccination in the morning, we see a stronger immune response than if we give them the same vaccine in the afternoon. And now I'm just going to read this because I don't want to mess up the stats. The administration of many cancer treatments is also being examined from a personal timing perspective to maximize the effects of the drugs and limit the toxicity of the effects on our healthy cells. And in experimental models, more than 30 anti-cancer drugs have been found to vary in toxicity and efficacy by as much as 50% as a function of their timing. That's quite something, I think. Okay, I've nearly finished, and I've just wanted to say that I've given you here a very small flavor of this very exciting world that's opening up, which has to do with light and health. And I think that we need to bear with the science. Things are not known yet. There's still much to know. We need to make sure that we're not trying to give light as a drug because we don't know enough about it yet. But I do think, with regard to these 5 principles of healthy lighting, a renewed interest in the importance and functionality of daylight is most certainly the way forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Okay,
I agree with you wholeheartedly as well, that we've got to take it with a pinch of salt when people are saying this is the right light at the right time.
Well, I think we don't know enough. There's a lot of mixing up of terms. You know, when I hear people talk about lux and circadian in the same sentence, I know there's something maybe a bit wrong.
Right,
yeah.
Okay,
Anyway, thank you very much.
We'll be back in a second with our next speaker, Mr. Bradshaw. It is. Okay, I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Keith Bradshaw from Spears & Major. He is going to talk about not letting go.
Hello, everybody. I've got a very specific kind of thing to talk about today, which I hope will make sense by the end of it. What we do all the time is we use light in the most kind of creative, appropriate way. And sometimes the problem with light and lighting design is there's so many options, there's so much technology available and so many techniques and distractions that sometimes the hardest thing is to kind of edit it all down. And I think we've all seen projects and proposals where there's just too much kind of going on and the choices is too great. So what we spend a lot of time doing in our practice, almost to a fault sometimes, is working to find out what the right light is for the project. And I don't mean the right technology, I don't mean necessarily the right effect. It's to do with finding the essence of what the project's about. So this short talk today is about a few projects where we spent a lot of time kind of working out the right light. I mean, we all know that we are surrounded by light constantly. There's lots of different sources of light, and we don't have control of all of them as lighting designers, certainly not. There's all sorts of aspects of lighting in society that conflict with each other. But it's a reality. You know, if you're working in a kind of public realm project, for example, there are aspects to do with retail lighting and adjacent sites that have light that you have to kind of bear in mind. It's not a kind of perfect world by any means, but we have to be kind of acknowledge that this stuff exists around us. And in a sense, what is also kind of fun to think about in terms of lighting is the different types of light that we don't have access so much anymore to this stuff. We're not allowed to use this stuff so much anymore, but it was good. It had different qualities to it. And you can just hear they have a soundtrack to them, these lights, you know, and that's kind of, in many ways, we're kind of lesser for it. Whether it be the kind of, you know, the burning sources or the, you know, or the gases. You know, these things that kind of we're all used to, and they all had a kind of particular kind of character to them. You know, nowadays, you know, what we have is something much more kind of silent, which is, you know, the LED, the silent killer. You know, just it's all the same. It's all the same. And LEDs, in a way, are kind of mimic source. Anyway, in terms of the ideas, just go back on track a second. The right light is by no means about the source. I mean, forget that for a second. It's not about the source that you use. It's about the idea. And in a way, in a kind of creative design studio, you would expect a lot of ideas to be knocking around. But it's very rare that you find the right idea. And it's not just about, you know, brainstorming ideas and coming up with loads and loads of stuff. It actually takes a long time, we've found, to find the right idea. It's a needle in a haystack. I hope you get that. You know, you've got to find it. If you've found it, you've really got to, you know, and you find it, of course, you know, you've got to listen a lot more than you think. You know, in terms of design, you're like, oh, I've got a great idea, here you go, and you're trying to kind of ram it down people's throat. But actually, you've got to listen a lot with lighting. You've got to listen and understand what the project's about. And you've got to work out whether that's kind of appropriate and whether you feel that you can kind of, you know, augment the project, you know, with light in some way. But once you've found it, you've got to protect it from the wild dogs. You know, you've got to stop, you know, and that's what my kind of talk's about, really. Once you've found the right light for the project, you know it. Maybe you've found a way to express it to a client and the rest of the team, but you've got to really be careful to protect it. I mean, we've had many, many, many good ideas, but sometimes, you know, they go bad. And why do they go bad? They go bad because it turns out the idea wasn't that good after all. That happens quite often. Sometimes budget, the complexity, the duration of the project, people just get sick to death of it and it kind of dies. You know, what you thought was a kind of, somebody had bought into something kind of disappears during the process. Change a client, change a brief, you know, these things kind of happen to all sorts of projects. And of course, things like poor workmanship and the fact that we are the very last people to be there sometimes kills a good idea. So to actually deliver really good projects and to kind of protect these ideas all the way through is a hell of a task. A hell of a task, I tell you. It really is. So in terms of a couple of projects, this is a project which, amongst other things, is about the most simple, logical solution to the problem. I can't tell you who it's for, but you can probably guess. In terms of the hierarchy, let's say, of kind of what's the most important thing in a project, with this particular kind of client, they assume immediately, quite rightly, I suppose, in terms of sales, that it's the product that's the most important thing. But what we wanted to do was flip that around slightly and talk about the legibility of a retail environment before we spoke about the product. Meaning that, in a sense, what you do is you create a kind of a new hierarchy in a retail space. Because in a sense, with all due respect to the product, it sells itself. You know, the retail environments for this kind of client, the product is already sold before people have walked through the door. What people are remembering and understanding is more about the space that they're in. So in order to do that, you have to change the emphasis of what you light first. So what we basically created for them, and you can imagine this was not an easy conversation, was saying, okay, we're not going to light the product as the primary aspect. We're going to make the space look good first, then we're going to light the product, then we're going to make sure people look good, and then we're going to make sure that the ambient and the function of the space kind of works well. So what that means in really simple diagrammatic terms is that you make sure people understand the parameters of the space properly. You light, as it were, in this case, the upper floors where there is more retail, and the back staircase the brightest so people's eyes are drawn through. Then, of course, you know, the product has to come into play. it's a self-illuminated product after all. Then you make sure people look great in the kind of the adjacent spaces so they feel good as they're buying the product. And therefore, you make sure that the function and ultimately the ambience is kind of great. So when you kind of play that through, just in a really simple video, that kind of construction of layers of light, if you want to say, results in a really nice balanced composition. Now, of course, the product looks great, but the space is understandable. It's an architectural space after all. And it's a really kind of nicely understood space. But, you know, that simple highlight there on the top of a capital, that took us a long time to convince them that that was worth the effort. Another aspect to a different kind of project is when a client is being generous to a city, almost to the benefit of the city rather than to the benefit of their own particular project. And this is a project that we're doing on the waterfront of Hong Kong. And, you know, Hong Kong's a very, very, very dynamic city. And what we wanted to do was make sure that the waterfront edge of this particular project was well recognized from across the water. So it's almost a kind of branding device. But the people that kind of stand on the project, as it were, on this boardwalk, they don't get to see it. It's the people on the other side that get to see it. So in a way, you're kind of giving away the light for free, but by association, you're kind of hopefully attracting kind of people in. So as you stand here, you have no idea about what's happening just over on the other side of the boardwalk. You know, but this is a kind of integrated light that you just get a sense of from the other side of the water. You know, and that then kind of plays out programs and what have you to attract people across the water to your project. And similarly, this is a kind of a bit of a nutty one, is that on the top of that pavilion in position 2 there's a video screen on the roof of the pavilion, which obviously from the ground level you see. But when you're up on the adjacent kind of, this is a rough video, but when you're on adjacent buildings, you're kind of giving something to the city for free, effectively. You know, it's all attracting people to the project ultimately, but it's a kind of very different way to look at the way you deliver lighting on a project. Is it 6 minutes or is it 8 minutes? Next project. Authenticity is a difficult thing in lighting as well. Artificial light is by its very nature inauthentic. But to try and make artificial light feel authentic, you have to think really kind of hard. This is a project where we were working in the desert or adjacent to a desert. So we spent a lot of time thinking about the way ecology of the desert and the ecology of light in the desert works at night and how the plants kind of behave. And by association, you know, we're taking on aspects of the way, you know, night vision works and trying to enhance that, basically. We're trying to enhance the sense of night vision. So we're actually lighting a project, artificially lighting a project, you know, duping the eye into thinking that it's got a greater range in its kind of, in its night vision. And what that means is using a very low rendering gray light. Now, to produce gray light is actually really hard because, you know, white light is usually kind of trying to be full spectrum, but low color rendering kind of gray light doesn't sound very attractive, but actually it feels very natural to be in. Very feeble moonlight, very feeble gray moonlight. If you can mimic that, it actually feels very natural in some ways. Which means that, you know, the way we then pull out lighting of particular features, this is an underground park, as you do, but the way that you light particular features and the way that plants perform, particularly to different color temperatures of light, is really interesting. So there's not going to be any daffodils on this project, but daffodils, are, great in 3,000 Kelvin, but the desert succulents don't look so great in 3,000 Kelvin. But then, of course, if you flip that around, as it were, the kind of desert plants come alive. So we were very, very mindful of a kind of designing a lighting scheme which felt very natural and authentic, for this particular kind of setting. To create a really wonderful environment. And all the time, I don't know if you can see these images, when you're making these wonderful renders, you've got to prove it to yourself. So that brick wall at the back is actually lit with about 16,000 Kelvin white light. And then you just get grey. You stop being blue and you start being grey, and it begins to feel like a form of moonlight, effectively, as the backdrop for this whole thing. Modesty as well is my kind of other one as well. When you hear people like me talking about projects about light, we are always sources and what have you. And I think sometimes we have to remember that when you work very closely with other designers, it's not about the light. And you can talk at length about lighting projects, but the best projects actually are when it's more than just lighting or just interior design or just architecture. It's actually when the light and the project and the materials and the ambience and the detailing fits together. Because if I told you how this was lit, it'd be pretty boring. There's downlights, there's pendants, there's a few recessed details, but so what? It's more to do with the way we spent such a lot of time talking to this particular client about the right way that light could reveal the ambience of their space. And I think sometimes when you walk into a successful project, it's not the detailing that your eyes are drawn to, it's just the feel. And this is, in terms of lighting design, I think is one of the most difficult things to do. You know, it's when the project feels right, it's most difficult. And just, you know, balancing out the different kind of materials, fabrics and stuff. This is not about light, this is about light and materials. And when you're kind of, as it were, revealing the materials at this level, it actually feels quite good, you know. So, I suppose the point of this little kind of talk was to, you know, not letting go isn't about being stubborn. It's actually about finding the right kind of atmosphere and quality of light for a project. And once you've found that and you believe that it's absolutely right, our job, is to spend sometimes as long as 10 years protecting that against all the odds, against the budget, against the clients, against the workmen, all these things, just to make sure it's kind of, it's the right light. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. It's a shame we haven't got time for questions. So really good, really insightful. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to get our next presenter, Inessa. I can see you sat there in the audience. We're going to get you wired up and back on if you head that way. If you're watching on YouTube, we are still streaming live. If you've missed any of the talks from earlier, we'll be able to bring them back. You'll be able to rewind and have a look, and it'll all be up there. We're going to upload a full 1080 HD set tomorrow as well. Okay, we'll be back in a minute. It was a great night here at Darc last night, and it's going to be the same again. There's going to be a cocktail making competition. There's drinks on all the stands. So if you're sat in the office watching this now, come down here later on. 6:30 the drinks come out, 7:30 the cocktails start. It's all going on tonight till 10 o'clock. Now, a quick video from our sponsor. The sponsor of the Darc Room live stream is Lightly Tech. They're here in booth 10. Next speaker is Inessa Demidova. Did I pronounce? And she's going to talk about empathetic lighting design for healthcare environments. Inessa.
Hi, how do I use this thing? Oh, sweet. Hi, everybody. My name is Inessa, and I'm a designer. Most of the time I design lighting, and most of the time I design things within a company called Arup. And today I would like to just share with you a little piece of work we've done recently for Chelsea and Westminster Hospital together with Arup Operations Consulting and CW+. So what's CW+? Chelsea and Westminster Hospital is a hospital in West London. It's really well built. It looks like a mall, but also it has its own charity. And the charity is trying to do their best to create better healing environments for their patients, mostly using art, performances. The entire hospital is just filled with various sculptures and paintings. There are dancers around. They have their own cinema. And in addition to that, they trying to find out how to create a healing environment through design. So that's where we come in. Maybe a couple of years ago, Arup was commissioned to create a set of healing design principles, which ultimately became this three-step process of removing the negative, making sure the design is good, and adding the further improvements. And that included maybe 15 disciplines or so. And lighting was one of them, where we said, okay, we're going to eliminate the stressors, we're going to have like no glare, no flicker, you have to make sure it's pleasant ambience, and maybe you have some biophilia, maybe you have some play of light and shadow, some artwork, and that would be all in well. And I think the way you want to do that in most cases would be to give this to CW+, to the charity, to use as their tool to give to the next designers. But when they came back to us about a year later and asked us to actually do some work on lighting, we thought that maybe that's not enough for us. It would be much more interesting to get away from the desk-based design and to go in and try to just get actually the feel. So we were given a few spaces, mostly within the older patients' wards and maternity wards with a few special rooms. We wanted to understand who are the people are in every single one of the spaces, what they're doing, what they're feeling, who are they interacting with, what's going on throughout the time. Is it busy? Is it not busy? For that, we conducted a little bit of interviewing. We've done 2 observations during the night and during the day. We then concluded that with a client workshop, and now we're using this set of know-how, knowledge, I guess, to collaborate with the architects and artists and other designers and engineers. So working with the operations consulting, which is a colleague of ours who has a background in environmental psychology, we developed 3 interview templates, 1 for staff, 1 for patients, 1 for visitors. We created a big sort of scoring card. We created a number of questions, and from that, we tried to figure out what would be differences in their values, what they need, what they want. Doesn't work like that. When we actually came in, we realized everybody is extremely busy, nobody has time to talk to us, everybody's really stressed. So it was all running around, being like, hey, do you have 2 minutes? Luckily, it was our colleague who is an environmental psychologist who was doing that, and she was brilliant at it. So we found out that older patients need a lot more care, they need a lot more light, that maternity patients get really uneasy, really tense, there's too much noise, there's too much light for them. The clinical staff, they need stimulation, they have no clue what's going on, they need more visibility. They don't understand what time it is after 12-hour shifts, whereas maternity patients maybe don't understand what time it is because they need to sleep a lot. Older patients don't understand. And all of that is going against the needs of other people. And that was quite something. So to understand that better, what I also found it very interesting is when we were creating the questionnaire, instead of, if I were to do that, I would say, what do you think about lighting here? Is that all right? Yeah, all right, I don't know. Color temperature, do you like 3,000 kelvins? 4, 5, 6? And what we developed instead, which was really good, is there anything which you want from lighting but other people wouldn't want? What will your dream lighting look like here? Is there anything stopping you from sleeping at nights? How do you feel in this space? And that gave the answers which were much more insightful than just generally asking about the lighting. How would you describe the ambience of this hospital? Is it tired? Is it really okay? Is it good? Is it bad? Why is that? And then we went and spent a lot of time, hours and hours and hours, actually in the hospital, looking around, seeing what it looks like, why people feel so disoriented. Why is there so many men in a maternity ward? Kind of makes sense, but I've never been to a maternity ward before, and it turns out so many men. Why people can't find where they are. So there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of light, there's a lot of people walking around doing things, there's a lot of really tired-looking people with tiny humans. I guess it was maternity ward. And just walking around, noticing other things. Say, there's a lot of equipment. Is that equipment in the drawings? No, it's not in the drawings, but it's there, and it's not going to go anywhere away. Is that something we could be using in our future design? Yes. Is that something I could have figured out from a lighting standard? No. There is no focus on key navigation tasks. There's wayfinding, there's toilets, there's bathrooms that look exactly like the staff rooms. There's staff rooms which we could not find, only staff nowhere. Again, there's a lot of really beautiful clues we picked up from seeing what people do. So labor ward, you don't stay there for long. People stay there between 24 and 72 hours, yet they need to have blinds. They put this improvised, some sort of like just blankets to block out the light, which means they have so much light and something needs to be done. So going forward slightly, we already reviewed all the architecture drawings and I said, you have not allowed for blinds, put blinds. Here's why. We looked at the strange policies they have in there. Why do they have this policy to turn off the light from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m.? And we have so many people why that is. Nobody knows. And what happens between 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. when the light is off? Everybody is carrying just as normal. People can see everything. There's a lot of borrowed daylight from the wards. There's still lighting in the station, and actually it's much better like this. Why is it not like that at all times? Good question. Wouldn't have known if I wouldn't be there. And talking about being darker, why is this the best place in the whole of the maternity? The darkest place, the birth center, which is including the reception. Everything is dimmed down. All of the people we had interviews with kept going back to saying, can we just have the same as birth center? Not ever in my life as a lighting designer, I would have thought that the best place to do a hospital would be just have it really, really dark. And the same for other places. They have this part of the birth center is the birth rooms with baths. And they have a much better lighting. They have put a lot of thought in there. There's a number of layers. There's color changing. There's wall lights. There's linear lights. And then there's control for it, which nobody can use. Because it's hidden in a cupboard. It's surrounded by these pipes. It's surrounded by clutter. And the touchscreen is not aligning with the buttons, so it doesn't really work. So something like that. Do we spend a lot of time figuring out where the touchscreens are, what the touchscreens are? How is it working? Everything which was done on the left has been basically compromised by this one thing of where you put your control panel. Same with the wayfinding. There's somebody who's done all the wayfinding bits, and they're like, okay, so this is going to work, this is not going to work. And then somebody has done layouts for lighting. And what you see there is we would not have been able to navigate ourselves if we didn't have the stuff showing us where to go. And people have to spend their first 24 hours after a stressful period not knowing where they are, what's going on, and with that. Then we went through this really dodgy hospital corridors, to the older patients wards. What we found is much busier, but it also gets a bit darker. It gets dark at night, yet there's still light, which could be disturbing. And because people have vision impairment, and because they can be losing their ability to understand what's around them, they have color-coded toilets, which are not that visible during the night. And could lighting help with that? Yes, it could, if only we knew. We also looked at their control systems. The lighting in control systems seems to be very similar between the night and on. But why? Maybe because it was only tested during the daytime, maybe not during the nighttime. We looked at the various environmental kind of biophilic interventions, such as the ceiling tiles. But for some reason, the ceiling tile with the sky is literally next to a luminaire. Can you look at it and feel like it's the sky? The idea was there. So then we went through a couple of special rooms. This is the room where people having all the activities. Is that conducive to having all the activities? We don't know. We don't really see how this all happened, but it seems like they brought 5 chairs in, thought people were going to play cards in there, and then there's a reading group, and then there's something else, and then it comes like this. Was it designed like this? This is a really well-designed room. There's been a lot of thought put for arts, for the colors, for the lighting. Everything's compliant. But this is the room where you're given bad news. Imagine sitting in this little corner chair and somebody's telling you somebody you really love is not going to fare so well. Could they do something better at that? Yes. Why is it like that? Well, empathy. Same for different types of lighting, but maybe that's just me being a lighting designer. And then we were looking at all the other bits where people tried to do something biophilic, like this, like that, like this. This is an artwork by Brian Eno. It's really good, famous, well-established musician, next to 2 flickering 600 by 600 LED lights. Do we need flickering lights in a hospital? Maybe not. Brian Eno's good, flickering, maybe not so much. Why is that? Don't know, but we were there. Another amazing thing which we found is the accidental arts. All throughout the hospital, people have thank you cards, little artworks they put together, affirmations, which is so important for both staff and patients alike, and makes a lot of difference, but it's not given any accent. It's not elevated in any way with any design language because it's accidental. It's not meant to be there. And based on all of that, we took the interview summary. We gave our recommendations, but what's more important is we took all of the good work of the positive and negative things in lighting, all of the healthy lighting strategy, and with all of that in mind, we can know so much better what is actually important in every single one of these areas, and what we can really do to now and to make it better. And as a guidance, it's been an incredibly invaluable tool, which we've been using just in the initial discussions with the architects. We've been using that for reviewing the designs which are already going on. We've been using that with the clients. We've been using that for some of the possible future work we could be doing. And as a conclusion, I would say that really, in 3 sentences, nothing really beats being there, because what looks good on a drawing, but looks good and ticks all the boxes and compliant to all the ideas of good design, might be really wrong for staff or patient, because I've never been a nurse. I've never been a patient with dementia or in a maternity ward. But I can go there and experience in there, and working with an environmental psychologist taught me so much. For example, that more time can be spent doing the controls. And another thing is having this ability to value things up or down according to how important they are based on experience of people in the place. The designs don't have to be much more expensive, because you can balance things, have important things with more design value, have less important things with less design value. I think that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nessa. It looks like you went through a real learning experience there just by visiting the hospital and opening the eyes and looking around.
And being with environmental psychologists who actually had a proper methodology to do that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Our next speaker is coming up in just a second. We're going to move into a short section that's focused on the product side of lighting, almost. So we'll be back in a minute. Okay, welcome back. That was a short video from Lightly Tech, our sponsor for the live stream. They are upstairs in booth 10, if you haven't visited them yet, to see their take on the OLED paradigm, solving the OLED paradigm. Our next section, we've got a short half-an-hour section now that's going to actually focus more on the product side of lighting, and we're going to start off with George Singer, who's going to talk to us about true beauty. George.
Thanks very much, Martin, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. It's a pleasure to be here. My name's George Singer. I design and make bespoke contemporary chandeliers and lighting installations. I'm going to talk you through a variety of my projects that I've carried out over the years. This first installation is called Zephyr. It's a 60-meter-long lighting installation for a five-star hotel in St Andrews on the east coast of Scotland. It's made of 20,000 stainless steel discs, which are very, very thin. And me and 8 other designers spent 3 months to build the whole installation and 3 weeks to install it. The brief from the interior designers was to create an installation which reflected the surrounding countryside of St Andrews Bay. It's right on the coast, so the installation is designed to reflect murmurations of starlings, shoals of fish, clouds, some trees, long grass in the wind, the crashing waves on the big rocks, all of those things. And
every single channel can have a value between 0 and 512. So this is exactly what you need to control, for example, RGB lighting. This is mainly for color, for dynamic lights. So it can be tunable white, it can be white, it can be like a color mix, but the main purpose of the control is for dynamic lighting and color. So this is built on a serial connection. and it uses 3 wires. So this is the main problem and the main thing that is important for this technology. This is you have to make sure this is correctly wired. That's the only problem compared to DALI. With DALI, there is no plus, no minus, no ground. Here, there is. This is the. In fact, to start with, this is the most important thing: is to use correct wires. When you're done with that, I mean, everything can be controlled, and there is a chain of a DMX chain is 5 channels, and this is called the universe. And if you need more than 5 channels, so imagine like for every single pixel, RGB is 3 channel RGB or RGB white 4 channels, then you've got like 5 channels. If you need more channels, then this is what we call another universe. And all this can be carried over now Ethernet, of course, with the to imagine like for lighting facade, you need a big amount of DMX channels. So this is why we now use like Ethernet technology to carry the signal, when it was only like simple like microphone cables with 3 wires in the past for stage lighting. So yeah, as I say, like multiple DMX universe can be carried on the on Cat5 or Cat6 cable now. This is what we use in the as a standard. So you've got the controller for the LED driver, spot drivers, or eventually some lights with built-in DMX receiver, so they can interpret like the information sent by the controller. So here we have like different kind of DMX controllers. Can be like basic, like DIN-rail mounting interfaces. Most of the time for stage lighting, this is more like console, but in our case for architectural solid state lighting, they are programmable, so they come with a piece of software. Usually you program the lighting sequence with the software, and then everything is stored into a DMX controller. This can be like a basic electronic interface or touch panel like we have here, or DIN-rail module for larger installations. So why DMX? First of all, it allows a large number of LED lighting features to be controlled simultaneously. So imagine like big facade for a tower. If you want to play like eventually a video, you can use like DMX to do that. And I have all those LEDs synchronized, and it have some fancy, amazing like dynamic color sequences for RGB or RGB white, or eventually simple white LED. So the main advantage, if we were comparing to DALI, I don't know if you're familiar with DALI, which is more for static lighting used for commercial buildings. This is the speed. This signal is very fast, which makes it possible to control and to create like some smooth effects for LED. So imagine you're creating, for example, a color fade with LED. The problem that you would have is the signal was not fast enough. You'll see some flickering. So because of this signal, you have the possibility to create some very smooth fade and have some nice color, because we are not in the live entertainment market. You don't want to have like some fancy flashing. Say, imagine this is like for like a nice building, historical building. You don't want to play like a fancy colors. So you have to have very smooth fades, and DMX is the right tool for that. This is also compatible with all lighting manufacturers. This is a standard. So which means that as long as this is DMX 512 approved, it will work. And this is very important when you have this installed with multiple products from different manufacturers. So with one controller, you can have a very large amount of LED products using ArtNet protocol. ArtNet is basically DMX over Ethernet network. So it's, instead of having like one cable carrying like a single DMX universe, you can carry like up to, I guess it's now like more than 10,000 universes on the same cable. Another advantage of the DMX is the possibility to use software programming, which allows, like with timeline or like video editing software, in fact, the computer offers the possibility to create some very nice effects, very good looking. If the lighting designer, they want like sometimes some fancy colors, this is really easy with the help of the computer to keep those standards. Can also be integrated for, this is more for residential, but with home automation. So imagine like there is a possibility to have all those control systems to be connected together with cloud, even with third-party now information like Google or Amazon Alexa. I mean, everything is possible. With the help of the software, you got the possibility to have everything to work together. This is what we call like connected devices. I mean, you can have like the shutter, lighting, everything connected together. I know this is more for residential, but also for like commercial use. Sometimes you've got some customers, they want to use that. And last point, retrofitting is possible with the wireless DMX solutions. There are some wireless systems that they work perfect, and imagine because the problem of, again, I remember I say like the problem was the wiring. So when you get to an install that is already like in charge, the problem is carrying the DMX somewhere. With wireless DMX, this is now possible to use, like, as long as the power is there, there is the possibility to retrofit the install and move from standard lights to a DMX compatible light. So for what kind of application? Everything, indoor, outdoor, for lighting control, for commercial use, for residential. It can be fountains, it can be for theme parks, because we control lights, but we can control everything. It can be like a coffee machine if you want it, as long as you have the right electronic device to convert the DMX to something with power. Stadium, museum, airport, facade, everything is possible. As long as it is DMX compatible, what you need is the right power supply, LED, DMX control, and then they can talk to each other. So basically, every kind of application can be controlled over DMX. The only limit is the imagination, in fact, because everything is possible. So as long as you want to do something, DMX allows to do it. This is what is important with that technology. What kind of device you can control? Everything, LED tube, in-ground spot, big architectural fixtures, wall washers, LED strips. This is available for street lighting as well, underwater, fountains, moving heads. I know moving heads is not really like what we might talk here, but this is something that is possible as well for like what we call architainment. When you have this special event, this is sometimes good to lighting a facade, for example, to use like some nice gobo and projection. DMX allows to do that for special events. And so with the DMX, all those kind of lighting devices can be connected together with a single controller. This is what is important. You don't need like to have like a controller for this, a controller for this one, another one for this, and no possibility to have them talk to each other. Here, one controller, multiple devices, they can talk to each other, and then it depends on the controller, of course, but this can be like synchronized with clock, calendar. You can receive information from sensors, from whatever. Like it can be like control over the cloud now, because we have also the possibility to have some cloud applications and some remote location. Imagine you have this project with a shop, like a chain of shops, like 100 shops over the world. You want to have the possibility to remotely update the lighting from a location. This is going to be possible. Just sending information to a controller. As long as you know the lighting which are behind this, it will be possible to control them and update like a different color for Christmas or whatever. So, in conclusion, like DMX is the perfect solution for lighting control. For simple reason, it's flexible, scalable, integrable, powerful enough to run like LED, and also programmable. It offers the possibility to program instead of use like preset controllers sometimes, which gives like a couple of colors, but as long as you want to do like something a bit more according to your needs, you will have to program it. And with the help of software, it helps a lot for this. Numbers of LED devices can be controlled and synchronized, and this is what helps to create like amazing color mixing effects, or eventually white effects. I know like tunable white now is very important in this industry, and the DMX is the perfect tool to do that. Of course, there are some possibility to have some gateway between DALI and DMX. DALI is more used for commercial, for office lighting, and there are some DALI to DMX or DMX to DALI gateway that enables to have those information, those two protocols to communicate together to light a building. So whether this is for indoor, for outdoor, there is a DMX controller for the project. This is what is important. You don't need of course, there are like numbers of DMX controllers in the market, so you will always have to look for the right controller for this application. But because of the standard, it makes it possible to control everything. And that's what is important with DMX. And something I forgot to talk about is the DMX works with addressing. That means that there are 512 channels that are paid like for one DMX universe, and it works by addressing, which means that every single device will have its own what we call DMX address on the, let's say, on the network, which means it gives the possibility to the controller to send the right information to the right device on the network. This is like something like IP addresses on the local network for computers. This is the way they all have their own make sure they receive their own information. And the basic of the wiring is you go to one device, there is an input and an output. So it's a chain, and this is how it works compared to DALI, which is easier to. DALI is a little bit easier to wire. This is a wire with a star, but the problem of the DMX is this. This is the only problem, in fact, the wiring. So as long as wiring is done with the addressing, with the system of addressing, everything can be connected, and this is also very effective for retrofitting, as I said, like because of the wireless system. It is possible without wireless DMX as well, but again, wiring is the thing that has to be done properly in order to have a nice DMX installation. As long as DMX wiring is done, there is a DMX control solution for your project. So again, DMX, wires, and that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bruno. Thank you.
Welcome.
So if someone was watching you on YouTube and they think, I've got to get down to Darc Room and find out a bit more about DMX, what booth are you on?
It's 22, I guess.
22,
yeah.
there you go. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll be back in a minute with our, I think it's the third last presentation of the day. It's another double act. Join us in a minute. We're just going to get them wired for sound and we'll be there in a second. Thanks. Okay, welcome back to our live stream, sponsored by Lightly Technologies, who are here showing their brand new Hikari Square panel upstairs on booth 10. As I said, our next presentation is from a double act. It's from Alex and Karen from LDI. Please come and take the stage, guys. I'm going to hand you the microphone.
Yeah, cheers, thank you. Hi there. So my name's Alex, and this is Karen, as Martin just said, and we're both working at Lighting Design International. So, is this arrow, right? Yes. Got it. Okay, so we both asked ourselves recently, what can designers do to spread the message of good lighting design around the world? And we that gave us the idea first to look at how lighting design is communicated to, firstly, the lighting industry, but also outside the lighting industry. And there's a few sort of areas that we singled out. Sorry, that was a little bit in advance. So one is the obvious one, which is doing great work and getting recognized for it. The other one is things like the Darc Awards, which is obviously connected to this event, and sort of the presence of the imagery during those awards. The other one is just getting mentioned and credited in articles and publications. And the last one, which is just became a big one for us, is the presence of lighting designers and lighting design in social media. So this is a good example of a project which got a lot of exposure through the Darc Decorative Awards last year. Hopefully it's familiar to you guys, at least to some lighting designers, and it was recognized in an award, but also featured in publications online and in print. Sorry, that's just a picture of the Darc Award.
Here is another example of a project in a lighting-specific award ceremony showcasing the creativity range and variety that lighting designers can bring to a project. These are great examples of projects getting recognition in a lighting-specific awards event. But what if these projects were shortlisted in a lighting category in a wider design industry award event? A recent example of a project where lighting design played an important part in the initial concept is the Fine Watches department in Harrods. The timing of our involvement in the project was important because the concept relied heavily on the integration of lighting within architecture. This was possible through the client's experience of working with lighting designers on previous projects. The high-profile project featured heavily in the media. However, despite lighting design being a key feature in describing the project, the lighting designer is rarely identified in the articles. To help explain how much of a missed opportunity this is, I'm going to quote an extract from the design article. Above the stairs, a vaulted ceiling dome is illuminated by lights programmed to sync with natural daylight levels, gently shifting throughout the day. According to the architects, the oval shape of the light feature was designed to reference the shop's original ground light wells. Lights in the coving and along the floor edges provide a diffuse light throughout the gallery space and stairwell, and the individual staircases are lit to showcase their wares to their best advantage. The pale color scheme, carefully celebrated lighting, and soft walls were all chosen to create a calming atmosphere and a hushed acoustic. This is one example where awareness of the role of a lighting designer on a project could be promoted through better communication with the media in the wider design industry. By being credited for our work, we are helping to increase the status of our industry and inform a wider audience of a lighting designer's involvement in projects.
Thanks. So anybody who's done a presentation to a client knows the sort of power of images in a presentation. And this is an example of an installation we did at the Darc Room a couple of years back, which got a lot of exposure in social media. And it kind of, to us, highlighted the point that that there is potential for a viewer of the image to follow the links and sort of find the original designer or the original event where this occurred, and potentially linking the client, a potential client, and a designer in the future.
Thanks. To test this, we punched architecture and lighting into Instagram, and these were the results we got. There were examples of architectural lighting, day lighting, and light art. So a good variety of images of the overall profession. We also tested the word spa lighting in Pinterest, and one of LDI's projects came up. Clicking on the image brought up the original post. Clicking the image again took us to the website where the original image was used in the article and LDI was mentioned. So this was a good example of a software program providing a platform where an image provided a link to information on the designer. Here's an example of a typical search done every day by interior designers, architects, and even potential clients, which helps promote lighting design.
Thanks. So Instagram has been mentioned a lot already, but it's also featuring more heavily in project briefs at the very start of a project. Recently, we had 2 projects where the Instagrammable sort of effect was mentioned specifically in the brief. One was for a hospitality project where they mentioned that they wanted the place to feel Instagrammable, which I wasn't entirely sure how to sort of interpret that, but it does kind of give you some guides about sort of how to create a space which is sort of got some atmosphere. And another project that we also had Instagram mentioned in was Harrods Roast and Bake. And in this case, they mentioned 2 things. One was a Instagrammable space, and the other one was Instagrammable effects. And the way we interpreted that was creating a sense of sort of an atmosphere of drama in the space, which was also part of the brief. So Graham Rollins, who worked on this, who led this project, basically introduced dimming into Harrods, where they dimmed the chandeliers down to a very low level, and sort of created a contrast by using localized lighting, concealed localized lighting, to accentuate the product. And that was one of the main points that Harrods wanted, was to create a sense of drama, but also to highlight the product, which is, I think, quite effective in this picture, especially with the branded loaves in the background.
As mentioned earlier, social media provides an opportunity for individuals and specifically lighting designers to reach a wider audience by increasing awareness of a lighting designer's role in projects. Richard Branson on Twitter is an example of an individual communicating his vision and also promoting his company's ethos, adding to traditional marketing strategies. His recognition and status has had a profound influence on issues and areas his company is involved in. On a similar note, Twitter is an example of a platform empowering lighting designers to increase awareness of their work and the lighting design community.
Thanks. So this led straight to you guys, Sharon and Martin, partly because we're very familiar with your work, but partly also because it's a good example of designers sort of reaching out to outside of the lighting industry. And The Perfect Light for me was a good example of a project which interviewed lighting designers but across the world, but was clearly, my interpretation was, it's sort of intended for a wider audience, and it reached that audience through the screenings that you did around the world. So a good example for us all.
We feel that lighting designers have a responsibility to communicate the value of a lighting designer on a project. Clients, contractors, and architects' awareness of lighting design is critical in determining the timing of a lighting designer's involvement in a project and their ability to influence the overall appearance and impression of a space. So we feel that by increasing the awareness of good lighting design outside the industry, especially through social media, is an opportunity to increase the impact of our work. The end.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you. And obviously now you are out there on YouTube, increasing the awareness yourself, so don't forget to retweet it, Instagram it. And you're not actually the first person to mention Instagram as part of a brief. That came up yesterday as well. It is becoming a remarkable thing that people think of Instagrammable. That's a brief nowadays. Okay, we're going to switch things up after the next break again. We're going to have another double act, but it's going to be a Q&A with Helen and Monica Tolgard. We'll just set that up and then we'll come straight back.